Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Well, today I want to answer a question that's been asked quite often of me because I mention from time to time that I roast my own coffee beans. And people are always asking about that. And the reason why I do it, number one, is because, trust me, it tastes way better than anything. I don't care what you buy and how the high quality and everything. Home roasted, fresh roasted coffee is better. But it's also an excellent prepping thing because roasted coffee spoils. It doesn't go bad to the point that it can make you sick. It just won't taste real good after a short amount of time. It does not have a long shelf life. So the only long-term option for coffee is instant coffee, which is a form of freeze-dried coffee. But you can have good quality fresh roasted coffee whenever you want it if you buy your beans green. If you buy them unroasted and green, they have a shelf life pretty much like any other bean, like a pinto bean or something like that if they're stored properly. And then you can just roast it whenever. And it's much cheaper than buying the high quality beans. It may not be as cheap as the generic coffee, but if you're used to getting good quality coffee, you will save money doing it this way. So I want to show you the whole process and how I do it. And you can get home roasters. There's all kinds of machines. You can use old popcorn machines, but I just use a cast iron skillet. I think it tastes better that way, and it's really easy. So I'm going to give you the whole process from start to finish and throw in some tips that I've learned along the way. I've been doing this probably for 5 or 6 years now, so while I'm not an expert, I kind of know what I'm doing. So anyways, today I'm going to be roasting some beans from El Salvador. This company that I buy from, I have no business relationship, no affiliate account with them, but it is my favorite. Over the years, I've gone from buying them from Amazon to various different companies, and I find that their beans are really good quality and the price is good. It's Bodie Leaf Coffee Traders. I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to check them out, and you can buy it anywhere from a 1-pound bag all the way up to several hundred pounds. And if you just check on there, they have a whole list of all the beans available, and you can get bulk green coffee beans anywhere from as cheap as $5.50 or so a pound, all the way up to $12-14 a pound, just depending on what you want to get. And the price fluctuates almost daily. It's quite often. And if you wanted to go in and buy a large amount, like several hundred pounds as a group or something, if you contact them, they'll give you a kind of a wholesale price. So and they come in bags like this usually. And so that's what we're going to start off with. I also recommend having dedicated spoons because, as you can see, they get burnt, and it looks like the turkeys are going to come check us out. They get burnt and well used, so have some dedicated spoons. And also your cast iron. I would recommend having a dedicated cast iron skillet, typically an old one. It doesn't have to be perfectly seasoned like you would for cooking because you're not going to worry about things really sticking. And it's going to develop a coffee taste. So if you're using that skillet also to fry eggs, you're going to have coffee flavored eggs. So I would recommend just getting a good quality, but an old one, or whichever one is your oldest skillet to use. Now I do it outside as much as possible because it smokes a lot. You can do it in the house, but you need to have it well ventilated because it produces a lot of smoke. Today I'm doing it over propane, but you can also do it over wood fire. That's totally possible, and in fact you can actually smoke your beans too. So if you do it over the wood fire as you're roasting them, you can throw in some good green wood like a hickory or cherry that will cause it to smoke, and then that smoke will envelop the beans and add a little extra flavor there. So that's what we've got. Now I typically do it on about a medium heat. My skillet has been warming up. It's pretty hot, and that's a good thing. You want it to be pretty warm when you put the beans in. And then the biggest thing is you got to stay with it. This is not something you can walk away, not even for just a second or two, because once these beans start to heat up and start the roasting process, the time span from them being roasted to being burnt can be just a second or two. You have to constantly keep them in motion, constantly move them around, flipping the spoon over, rotating them in the pan, or they will burn. You're going to you're going to hear a popping, okay? So you're going to listen for a crackle or pop, kind of like a popcorn pop. And the first one is a little faint, so they go through 2 stages in the roasting process. They have the first pop, and that's when they're just starting to kind of turn from a green to kind of a yellowish color. And then as they start to turn a more of a brown and a tan and a darker brown, you'll hear a second pop. And from that point on, you can take them out whenever. You can have dark roasted, light roasted, medium, whatever you want. And I will tell you that even though a lot of people, and a lot of you probably really like dark roasted coffee, and the reason is because that's stale coffee that you're drinking from the store. And it doesn't have a lot of flavor, and so you have to roast it a little darker for it to have flavor. But when it's fresh roasted coffee, the lighter the roast actually has the most flavor and has the most caffeine in it. And typically the coffee connoisseurs and stuff don't tend to like as much of the dark roasted because it burns a lot of the flavor. You're burning the oils and the sugars out of it, which is where all the flavor is. So let's go ahead and get this started. You want to bring the camera into the skillet, and what we're going to do, like I said, I've got it at about a medium heat. I may adjust it down a little bit. You don't want to get too much in there, and I would actually start off with maybe less than what you see here when you're first getting going, because you have to rotate them around and they do expand and grow in size. And so if you've got too much in there, it'll just get almost too much to handle. You will most likely, like myself, develop a little pattern. Yeah, a few of them get knocked out, but you develop a little stirring pattern to keep them going. Let me turn up my heat just a little bit. It's a little breezy out here today, and if you do this in the wintertime, of course, being cold, you may need to turn the heat up a little bit more. You'll just kind of adjust it as you get used to doing this. They're just starting to, I'll show you here in just a minute. I can see a few of the beans that are starting to roast. And you can smell, the smell is absolutely amazing. You know, if you did this in your house, I assure you it's going to be extremely smoky, but you're not going to dislike the smell. If you like coffee smell, it's just amazing. And you know, when you get these beans, as you read, every bean, it's kind of like a wine. It has various different flavor notes, and I should have read off the ones that this one has. But sometimes there's a little cinnamon flavor note, chocolate, you know, all different floral, and you smell that the whole process that you're roasting it. I've had neighbors come over at times in the past and ask what's the smell, because it smells and it lingers. So of course, in a prepping situation or an end of the world, maybe doing this outside wouldn't be a good idea, but the smell does carry, and it's a really amazing smell. All right, I don't know how well it's coming in on your end through the camera, but we are starting to see some turning of color. They start to kind of turn a yellowish color, and you can kind of see maybe some of the beans in there that are a little lighter in color, and that's what they're doing. They're turning a yellow, and then they'll go to a real light tan color, and you might be able to start seeing some discoloration. You know, there's a yellow one, and then in some of these here, look at that one, it's tan on one side and kind of a yellowish on the other. And like I said, you're going to want to keep it moving. Now, if you notice, they have a little bit of a hull of shell on them, and it's just a paper shell. I'm trying to pick one up with the spoon. Well, right there. And that paper shell will fleck off. And at the end of the process, you can try to get some of that out. But, you know, some people are really anal about getting that out, and I've talked to other people that do this and they couldn't care less because it doesn't really affect the flavor, but most of it will get blown out, especially when you're doing this outside and there's a little breeze. As you flip those around and they pop off, the wind will just carry it out of here. So it's not something that I personally would worry about too much. We should be getting close to starting to hear some popping. And at this stage, while it's not super critical to keep it moving all the time, You could make little pauses that are a second or two long, but you certainly want to keep it moving. But now, once it starts really roasting, you definitely want to keep them moving, because they will burn quite fast. As you can see here, these are the little shell on them, the little husk, and the wind, a little bit of a breeze, and it's not too windy here today. It's just a slight breeze. It's carrying a lot of them away, and that's okay. And if you want, you can shake them off, kind of like you would wheat or something like that. In the end, they're really starting to turn now. This whole process, depending on your heat and the amount of beans, can take anywhere between 12, 15, maybe even 20 minutes time. And of course I am editing it because it's just a long video to stand here and watch beans getting stirred around. But that's typically anywhere between 12 and 20 minutes, depending on the amount and the heat that you're using. And like I said, on this outdoor fryer type grill thing, a burner, I'm running it pretty much right at medium. Now, of course, the question is why don't you run it just hotter and do it faster? Well, it's just like baking, You bake it for 40 minutes at 300 degrees, or you can bake it at 20 minutes at 600 degrees. You're just not going to get the same product, and that's the same way here. If you crank the heat up, it'll roast a lot faster, but they're really going to burn, and you want that slow heating up so that it's the flavor that's in these beans that you're drinking is the sugars and the oils. That's what you're really tasting in your coffee, and that's why older coffee that's more than really just a couple of months old, because coffee only lasts anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks before it starts really becoming stale. So anything older than that, stale, and a lot of those sugars and oils just aren't really good. The flavor isn't there. So you're mostly tasting the cooked husk or the cooked bean of the coffee bean, and that's why the flavor difference of fresh roasted coffee is just amazing. Now, when you're roasting this, after it's done, it needs to and I can't think of the name right now, but it needs to kind of breathe for 24 hours. There's a term for that, and it's slipping my mind. But anyways, so if you were to put this in, say, a mason jar as soon as you get done and you seal it up, not a good deal, because it's releasing for about 24 hours after they're done. It's releasing some CO2. So you want to leave it in a container that it can breathe for at least 24 hours. And as you'll see when I get done with this, as soon as they're done, you need to really get this off of here pretty quickly. All right, as you can see, they're starting to turn. And at this stage right here, or maybe just we're getting close at least, a lot of people would call this the really light blonde roast. And I'll be honest with you, I've tried it at this stage and it is really good. It doesn't grind that well, and it takes about twice as much coffee to make a good cup. It's really more of a tea, but it has a really excellent flavor even at this stage right here. You should start hearing some popping, so as soon as I hear it, I'll try to stick the microphone down there. All right, we're getting closer to a lighter roast. This would be very much a blonde roast. I don't know if you can hear the popping, but let me put the microphone down here. Now, we'll have to say that there is what some people consider a disadvantage to doing this, but I actually like it this way. As you can see that there's a different color. Some of these beans are much darker than the other. Now, if I used a lot less beans, I could keep my consistently level a little bit better, but doing it this way, you're never going to get a consistent roast with all of your beans. And I've talked to people that say they don't like it that way. When they want medium roast, they want medium roast. When they want dark or light or whatever it is. But when I roast them, I try to get a medium to light medium, and that way, probably 15% of the beans are more of a dark roast, maybe 15% of the beans are more of a light roast, and then the rest are kind of in the middle. And I've tried it different ways, and I think doing that you get a much better flavor because you're getting a little bit of all the different roasts, and at each different roasting level you're getting a different flavor from the same beans. So I like it this way. This is the way they would have done it way back in the old days. The pioneers, the early homesteaders, they didn't have a roasting machine or anything like that. They would get beans and they would roast them in an old skillet just like this over a fire, and I think the flavor is a lot better this way. Okay, at this stage, this is what I consider a blonde roast. I know I mentioned it earlier, that the earliest stage, this is what I would consider a blonde roast. And they're really good at this stage, but you still have to use a little bit more coffee to get a regular strength of cup. So I typically roast them a little bit more. And this is also about the point that they're going to start getting that second pop. So here soon we'll start getting the second pop, and then they'll really start turning more of a brown, as some of these obviously already are. Should be able to start hearing some of that popping on this second stage here. That second stage popping is where it's really starting to open up, and it's going to release more and more of those oils and sugars, which causes the beans to roast darker. But the darker they get, the more flavor, the more of those oils and sugars you're going to lose. So that's what all this smoke that you're starting to see rise up is, the oil that's burning off from the beans that's coming out. So it's really you're going to have to play around with this the first several times and see where you like it. And I would almost bet you that you'll end up liking it not in a place that you thought, because it's just, the flavor is so different. And I've learned that I personally don't like them to get too dark, because it burns off too much of that oil and that sugar, which is where you really get the flavor. And doing it this way when they're fresh, for those of you that like to put a little sugar in your coffee, you may not need that, because doing it this way, it's going to have a lot of sugars in it, and the coffee on its own will be much sweeter. There's also a lot less acidity in roasting beans this way. For those of you that have, upset stomach, indigestion problems, you probably won't have as much problem with fresh roasted coffee beans versus, the old ones. Okay, at this stage is where they're going to burn pretty easily if you don't keep them moving. So you certainly don't want to slack off. Even though your arm's going to get tired at this point, don't let up for a minute, because at this point they're really hot, the skillet's really hot, and it would not take but just a second to scorch that bottom layer of beans. And we're getting close to the point where I'm gonna go with these. I'm looking for maybe 15% of them to look pretty dark or medium dark, and maybe that many to be on the light, and then everything else right in the middle. The color that I'm looking for mine is a good chocolate brown, not that black brown color, but a good rich chocolate brown color. All right, I am just about ready to pull them off of here. If you folks could smell this, it is absolutely amazing. When I pull them off, I try to do it quick, because they're going to keep roasting, especially in this cast iron skillet, but really anything. You want to try to cool them down as much as possible. So I have a big cookie sheet over here to the side that I'm going to dump them in pretty quick. Now remember, cast iron skillets get really hot, so don't forget that. It's been on here for 30 minutes or so. It's going to be pretty hot at this point. All right, I am getting ready to dump them. Let me turn this burner off. and get them out. I want to spread those out pretty good. They're probably going to look lighter to you than you would expect. A lot of that's just being out in the sun. If you take them inside, they're going to look darker than you think. But this is a good level of roasting. Sometimes, you know, when I get a batch in, I'll typically play around and roast them different ways. Usually this is the roast that I end up with because I feel that it has the best flavor, but occasionally I'll roast them a little darker than this. So anyways, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer down below. But this is how we make coffee, and that we store it up, and you can acquire several hundred pounds of green coffee beans pretty quickly and have it for your long-term preps. All right, folks, thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.